President Obama is making good on his promise to once again defy the American people and sign an executive order to advance his gun control agenda because Congress refuses to do it. The president claims that in the wake of the recent attack in San Bernardino, California, that his decision to go around Congress is a matter of national security. But the NRA has already made clear this has nothing to do with keeping America safer. Instead, it's just another step to deny law-abiding citizens their right to own a firearm for self-defense, a right guaranteed by our Constitution. As former UN Ambassador John Bolton told me, the biggest threat to our national security right now is sitting in the Oval Office. Take a look.
It was unspeakable, the carnage that we were seeing. To be honest, you guys, it was a little surreal.
This is now a federal terrorism investigation led by the FBI.
This was tragedy that I've never experienced in my career.
We don't yet know what the motives of the shooters are. But what we do know is that there are steps we can take to make Americans safer. Common sense gun safety laws, stronger background checks.
The victims hadn't even been identified. And what is President Obama doing? He's calling for more gun control.
The first reaction of many people is, has this man no compassion at all for the families of the victims? Doesn't the president care? And that's the president's response. Whatever the problem is, whatever the tragedy is, more gun control will solve the problem. It obviously won't. It has nothing to do with the problem we're dealing with. And I think there's an unanswerable argument that if anybody at that Christmas party, it was a Christmas party for goodness sakes in San Bernardino, had been armed, perhaps the tragedy could have been mitigated. I think that the biggest threat to national security is sitting in the Oval Office. I don't think any of us ever believed we'd say that about a president of the United States. But his priority is not national security. I think to him it's an afterthought. I think he's using any excuse, any pretext, any bright idea his staff can come up with to try and advance the gun control agenda and to change the entire conversation. I think the president fundamentally views the Second Amendment as a constitutional anachronism, but I think it is consistent with what the president told us in the 2008 election. He wanted to fundamentally transform America. That was his phrase. And the notion that he's going to be distracted from that because of these terrorist attacks, he's not going to listen to.
We also need to make it harder for people to buy powerful assault weapons, like the ones that were used in San Bernardino.
It's not going to have any effect on the terrorists themselves. It'll be law-abiding citizens who are now not able to get weapons to defend themselves.
You look across the country, while the president's pushing gun control, gun sales are going through the roof.
I think this constant politicization of tragedies around the country, very disparate in what their circumstances are, all for one political end, is something that the American people see through. And I think that signal, maybe the president doesn't get it, in fact I'm certain he doesn't, but the people have the common sense to know the police can't be everywhere, our intelligence can't be perfect, and against a rising terrorist threat around the world. They're going to protect themselves. That's what the Second Amendment reflects. We've always felt we had the right and the duty to protect ourselves and our families. That's what Americans are now doing. My view is that with 1 year left in office, his name's not going to be on the ballot again. I think we're going to see in the next year an increased resort to his penchant, as he said, with his phone and his pen. Executive orders and changes in policy, regardless of what Congress may have to say on the subject.
Right now, people on the no-fly list can walk into a store and buy a gun. That's insane. And so I'm calling on Congress to close this loophole now. This is a matter of national security.
I think right now the no-fly list is one of these bureaucratic Frankenstein monsters that got started for a laudable purpose, but then nobody seems to know how to control it anymore. The notion you take something that's failing at its principal purpose, which is screening terrorists from flying, and then turn it to a completely unrelated purpose, just demonstrates how transparently political the president's suggestion is. In effect, it's punishing somebody by preventing them from purchasing firearms when they've never been notified they were on the list to begin with. A lot of people who are perfectly legitimate gun buyers have been put on because they have names similar to people who were thought to be terrorists, and once you've been put on it mistakenly, this can have real consequences.
Yeah, 10 years, you're still fighting to get off the list.
It's not just inconvenient, it can be time-consuming, expensive. You might need to get a lawyer, all to do what? To exercise a legitimate constitutional right when there's been no showing whatever other than being on this list that you're not fully entitled to buy a gun. It is a true catch-22 circumstance.
John, when President Obama first came into office, you said to me, Ginny, this is a post-American president. Has he lived up to that?
Absolutely. I think he's the most radical president that we've had. The damage is much worse than I anticipated, and it's just critical that we don't have another series of tragedies, especially associated with chemical or biological or, God forbid, nuclear weapons, before we wake up again. That's the nightmare that I have, and it's why I think the American people look at Obama and see somebody who's not doing what's necessary in the ISIS heartland. He's not doing what's necessary at the border. He's not doing what's necessary to review the social media communications of visa applicants into the United States because of some misguided concern about privacy, that we're putting somehow the privacy of a foreign national ahead of the safety of the American people. And he's trying to distract us with a false narrative about gun control.
As Commander-in-Chief, I have no greater responsibility than the security of the American people.
Obama looks at the world through the wrong end of a telescope. What keeps us safe is American strength, and what endangers us is the perception of American weakness. And under Obama, we appear very weak. That our enemies around the world have sized him up. I can tell you without qualification that the leaders around the world, friends and countries that have been with the United States through thick and thin, are appalled at the lack of American leadership. The good news is we can change it. I think this is a national security election. We've got all the notice we need. The threat is out there. And I think it's up to us to take control of our government again. We've got a lot of repair work to do. Once Obama leaves office, he will have left us in a deep hole. And as long as the terrorists think they can intimidate us and we have no means of defending ourselves, I think the risk of terrorist actions in this country will only grow. But I'm an optimist about America. I believe in the people. I don't believe in the political leadership in Washington. The burden remains with us. This has been true since the revolution. Right now, we've got a country that is under assault. So this is a critical time for Americans to size up what they need to do to keep the country safe. Register, vote, support candidates, get out and help the ones you like. This is a long-term investment, not just for yourselves, but for your children and grandchildren.